Good morning, everybody. My name is Leslie Ann Johnson. Welcome to this morning's post-cabinet press briefing. So we welcome all of you joining us on the Channel 22 or Facebook page, and of course the YouTube channel, and to our colleagues joining us via Zoom. We have with us this morning the Honourable Emmeline Pierre, Minister for Education, Human Resource Development, Religious Affairs and Information, as well as Dr. Sean Charles, the Chief Medical Officer. What we'll do this morning is start with Dr. Sean Charles, who will provide us with a COVID-19 update, and then we will go to the Honourable Minister Emmeline Pierre, who will talk about the reopening of schools and the focus for this particular term. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Dr. Sean Charles. Good morning, sir.
All right, good morning to you, and good morning to the listening and viewing audience. I will just give a brief update as to our status with regards to the number of cases and so on in Grenada where COVID is concerned. To date, we have recorded a total of 158 cases, 80 of which are imported, and 154 have recovered. We currently have 3 active cases, and all of these were imported. And we can recall that we had 1 death. To date, we have done just over 25,000 PCR tests. The 3 active cases are currently in isolation, and we have 289 persons in isolation at present. These are travelers who are at various stages in the quarantine process. Now, with regards to vaccination, we have vaccinated a total of just over 10,900 persons. These persons have received their first shot, and most persons are approaching the time to receive their second dose of the vaccine, but so far 30 have received same. Now, at present, we do not have any evidence of any community spread of COVID in Grenada. We have no clusters under investigation either. In the present circumstance, the Ministry of Health supports the full reopening of school. We do recognize that schools play a very important role in the development of children. The longer the schools remain closed, the greater the risks of a reversal in the educational gains that have been made, and of course you limit the children's development with regards to education and otherwise. We know that the longer schools remain closed, the greater the risks for our children. There will be higher rates of dropouts. Some children would simply fall off the radar. We know that when children are home, particularly unsupervised, they are vulnerable. All right, they are at increased risk of violence and exploitation, and we also have situations where access to some vital services, such as nutrition and vaccination, and the general support that children receive by interacting with their peers, which supports them emotionally and contributes to their mental health. All of these are important, and they are placed at increased risk the longer schools remain open. So the Ministry of Health fully supports the full reopening of schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sean Charles. So we'll hand over now to the Honourable Emmeline Pierre.
Thank you very much, Leslie, and let me thank Dr. Charles for his opening comments as well, and his usual support to the Ministry of Education, and by extension, I would say the entire Ministry of Health. Good morning to the viewing public and all of those who are following this press conference. I want to pick up from where Dr. Charles started on the subject of the full reopening of school. Over the weekend, after engaging our principals, we did issue a public announcement as it relates to what full reopening of school meant for Monday morning. And we did indicate that there are some schools where there's serious construction either in the wrap-up stage or at other stages, and the principals together with contractors and ministry officials felt that these schools needed another week to be able to accommodate students back. And so a short list of those schools was published over the weekend, and so those students remained at home on Monday. All other students were to report to school on the instruction of the principals and the teachers of those schools. And the question is why? We must remember that school has been on vacation for the last 3 weeks, and so the last day of school, some schools were accommodating all of their students every day, and some schools, because of their size and their population, were unable to accommodate every child every day because of the 3 feet physical distance protocol. The Ministry of Health indicating that we can proceed to accommodate all students, we felt that we needed to give persons notice of that where schools were not ready or prepared physically and otherwise for that full reopening. And so all principals were notified that if they were ready, meaning all of the logistical arrangements were in place, and all of their stakeholders were notified that they could have proceeded. And so we had about 70 plus schools that opened to full capacity on Monday. The others are working out all of the logistics during this week, and parents will be so notified. Let me use the opportunity, therefore, to welcome all of our principals, teachers, students, and ancillary staff back for the Trinity term of this school year, final term of the year, and to extend my very best wishes to all concerned. Of course, as we all know, the Ministry of Education has been experiencing many challenges over the past months as it relates to ensuring teaching and learning happens in the way that we expect it to. We have been constrained by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I just mentioned one way in which we are affected by the protocols, meaning that the protocols would determine how many students can come every day. We've also been affected by the financial situation, and I'll also give an example that in the last term, to be able to facilitate additional cleaners in schools, we had to tap into our school feeding budget to do that. And so it means that we now have to find monies to put back into our school feeding budget so that we'll be able to take the school feeding program to the end of the year. So financially, we are severely challenged. And then the third area of challenge, or major area of challenge, I would say, is that of the current industrial situation with the Grenada Union of Teachers. Let me use the opportunity to say that it is extremely important, and we have been working day and night to manage these challenges. And I want to quote from the UN Secretary General when he said that every country must take action to prevent or to avert a generational catastrophe waiting to happen. It means that if we do not manage these challenges, we may never recover from the negative impact of COVID-19 and other challenges on the education sector, and our children will be forever affected. And that is why we are putting so much efforts into managing. One of the areas I'm quite sure that the Secretary General was referring to is that of the academic performance of students. And it is the very reason I say to parents, do not be too conclusive on an A grade. meaning that you probably need to ask, at what level was the exam? Because a child who scores an A doesn't mean that they scored an A on the level of the exam they should be doing at their age or at the stage of the school year. The second thing I believe he is referring to is the many reports of students who are affected directly, psychologically and otherwise, and I do not want to go into too much details on this at this time, but just to say that there are so many reports of how our students are affected. And so it means that everything that everyone can do at this stage is extremely critical to ensure that our students have access to face-to-face learning, and they have that consistently, and that we do everything to catch up the best way we can. In addition to that, the emotional support, not just from our counselors in the schools, but I want to encourage our churches, our parents, persons in communities. Do not go on the belief that children are okay and that only adults are affected by this pandemic. So we do have reports of suicidal thoughts. We do have reports of strange behaviors. And so I call on all concerned, let us work together because this is serious. While we deal with all of these challenges, some countries have no choice. They've had to shut down school for many months, more than 6 months in some cases. And while they do that, there's no means through which teachers and students can communicate. We are very fortunate that we are not at this stage currently. And so we are pushing ahead, strategically so, on addressing as many of the issues to keep our education system as close to normal as possible. Let me use the opportunity, therefore, to update you on the CXC suite of examinations. Those examinations will be sat during the period May 27th to July 21st, and that includes 4 examinations: CSEC, CCSLC, CAPE, and the CPEA examination. The ministry is very pleased to say that as it relates to the CSEC examination, this year we are going to be doing paper 1 electronically. And the good news is that we are going to be doing far more than we did pre-COVID in that regard, meaning that only math and English will not be done electronically this year. It is a first for Grenada, and this, in my opinion, is commendable, the fact that we are in a crisis. Last year, we were not able to do any of the exams electronically. That being said, let me say that we continue to give all the support that we can. I know that our principals and teachers at the school level are also doing all that they can to prepare our students. We continue to work until the days of these examinations, and I wish to place on record my appreciation for everyone and what they are doing in that regard, inclusive of our parents. The strategic agenda and strategic approach of the ministry continues. We are not going to sit and wait on COVID-19 to address a number of issues, though the challenges we face. And so in no order of priority or importance, I want to just flag a few issues that we concentrate on this term. The issue of school security, and I've repeated that many times before. Unfortunately, I still do have to repeat this morning. It's a major challenge, and just to update you that we have decided to take a different approach to the issue of school security, and I'll just simply add that this is in collaboration with the Royal Grenada Police Force, and we are working with principals. We are going to be updating them of the new strategy as it relates to school security. Secondly, I want to make the mention of values and civics in school. And that I know is of significant concern to many persons looking at what is happening in our society, even the behavior of our adults. And we should not be surprised at how much our students are modeling us in those regards. And so, intensifying work on values-based education in school, we are about to launch a new initiative to support all of the efforts currently undertaken in schools as it relates to promotion of values. Civics has been an area of concern, and so we have started to explore this and the rolling out of a civics education program that will support and address some of the concerns that I referred to. In the same breath, I wish to say that the Ministry of Education has taken a decision that in every non-denominational school, a spiritual leader will be appointed to give guidance and support to the school in that regard. We consider this to be extremely important. And note I said the non-denominational schools because the denominational schools already have such persons in place. Our e-learning agenda, we are going to be placing significant emphasis there. We are not going to get complacent because we are preparing for the next crisis, whatever and whenever that is. And so we are going to be completing this term distribution of devices, and that is to our primary school students. So we finished our secondary school, started our primary. This term, we are completing our primary school students, and the process, I believe, starts this week with the reopening of school. Training of teachers, we will be continuing during this term. The review and addition of content, because having devices is one thing, ensuring that you have appropriate content is also important, and we continue to expand our work in that area. And the issue of connectivity is one that we are going to be addressing at the community level. As a matter of fact, some work has started in this area as it relates to vulnerable students. The issue of student academic support. Remember I said before that we are undertaking a baseline study, assessment of our students and where they are as a result of COVID-19 pandemic. We have received the results and we are now looking at programs to support our students who have fallen below the line of expectation as it relates to standard and performance, and we will be communicating with the public the results on this soon. The issue of school management is also very critical for us, management and support, and we will be providing additional support during this school term, as well as putting some new structures and systems in place as it relates to maximizing school management and leadership for the effective outcomes as it relates to student performance and the management of schools. Let me also add that as it relates to private schools, last term or last year, I did indicate that in keeping with the Education Act, the Ministry of Education started the inspection of private schools. I'm extremely pleased with the response and the support we have been receiving from our private institutions as we ensure that they are properly licensed to operate. I wish to also add in that same breath that no other institution will be allowed to operate before obtaining the clearance from the Ministry of Education as expected in law. Our health inspection of all schools will resume this term, and we will be placing emphasis on that area as we seek to keep a healthy environment for students and teachers. The issue of school fees is one that has been raised in the public domain. A lot of complaints coming forward. We do understand why those fees have been necessary. However, let me just make the point that the Ministry of Education is reviewing all school fees and will be engaging principals in the very near future and making a public statement as it relates to that, because we must keep those in line with the laws and what is expected, and we do have a proposed direction forward, and we would engage principals very soon. And the final area, that of skills training. Extremely important, especially in the context of the international conversation, in the context of the local conversation of the match between education, school leaving, and the job market. And so I want to just wish everyone all the success for this term and to say that we are going to be aggressively pursuing our education agenda in spite of the challenges that we face. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. So, colleagues, we've heard from the Honourable Minister Emmeline Pear as well as the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sean Charles. Anybody ready with their questions? GBN, good morning.
Good morning to members of the head table. My question, Minister, you mentioned of some of the areas that you'll be placing emphasis on as a ministry. And one of those you mentioned there is e-learning. Now, for the past maybe past term or two, I've attended a PTA meeting and I've heard the complaints of some parents, and they're seeking a response from the ministry's end in regards to whether or not they would be refunded for the time lost of their students not being able to make use of the e-learning devices. Many of them have had to return to the schools for repairs and so on. The full functioning, full operation and so on, full use of the devices have not been, you may say, done. What say you in relation to that? What can you tell parents? Or would it be a rollover into the next term that they would not have to pay come September for the use of the device?
So if there's a special case, and we deal with those things case by case, so within the arrangement that we've made and communication with parents, now remember, if you're dealing with, let's say, secondary schools, for example, 10,000 pieces, 10,000 tablets, now you expect that within that, you probably, if you have 100 pieces, for example, you did extremely well. If out of 10,000 you have 100 pieces with some sort of defect or the other. And so all of that is engaged within the contractual arrangement, right? And so if there is something that falls within that, and the Ministry of Education deals with those case by case. Now, if it's something for a minor repair, so a child may have done X or Y or Z, I can't see, except for maybe the very initial stages, when everything was done centrally because of the state of emergency and all that could have been happening at the time, everything was centrally done. Then all of those had to come to the ministry. Everything had to be done internally. What we've done is to deploy technical persons to every school. So if it is, for example, you want to find out A or B or C, you don't have to come to the ministry for that. The school will deal with that. But in the broadest sense of the question, I would say that would be case by case. And the numbers would be very small. So for example, if you speak 10,000 secondary and you speak 12,000 primary, the numbers, I mean, they would be very small comparatively speaking, and so they can be dealt with case by case where there might be a challenge.
You have another question, Christina? All right, Linda, good morning. Linda, good morning. Are you there? Go ahead.
Hello. Yes, morning. We do have to be on mute. That's why there is actually a 10 to 15 seconds delay. My question to the minister this morning. Last week, we see the UNICEF launching a comprehensive study on students who want to return to school, students and teachers. I've since learned that Grenada was not part of that study. The islands that participated was Anguilla, Antigua and Barbados, Dominica, Montserrat, St. Kitts, and Nevis, and Lucia, and St. Vincent. Can the minister explain to us why Grenada did not accept being part of that study? And my second question also to the minister. She mentioned that new monies have to be found for part of the school feeding program. Can she say whether or not that money has been sought through private sector, or whether it's a case of government repurposing allocation to now pass on to the Ministry of Education for the school feeding program? And my final question for now, the recent report by CDB mentioned that Grenada would have had to repurpose loans, educational loans for an institution to purchase electronic devices. Can she say to us which school was affected by that repurposing? The how much was used for the repurposing, and how much money was repurposed from that existing loan, please?
Thank you very much, Linda. I think those are excellent questions. The issue of the study, and let me commend the person from the media who shared with me that study and who inquired as to why Grenada was not represented. I was not even aware of that study. And so immediately, I did instruct the Chief Education Officer to reach out to UNICEF to find out why there was a Caribbean study, and when you look at the list of countries, Grenada stands out as not being represented. And only this morning, I actually saw the response from UNICEF explaining why Grenada was not included. And it's probably for good reasons, I would say, but we would still want to do the study. And we did express that we understand why we were not included, but we would still like to do the study for our own benefit. And to explain why we were not included, UNICEF explained the countries that were included were the countries who needed support from UNICEF in preparation of all of their written materials and their posters and their distribution of that through the school system. When they checked Grenada's situation, Grenada had already started distributing. Our posters were up, so UNICEF did not need to step in locally to assist us. And the second reason why Grenada was not included is the fact that when they checked all of the Caribbean countries, Grenada was one of those that already had its protocols established. Principals were already briefed, and students and stakeholders were already briefed and engaged in the development of special protocols for schools. When they examined Grenada's protocol, there was no need to provide assistance. So that survey was conducted among the member states where UNICEF had to step in and provide support to the ministries of education. But I still believe, and I shared that view together with the Chief Education Officer, that even if we probably were advanced in stage of implementation, we still would like to have that survey done, and so we await the response of UNICEF as to whether the instrument would be made available to Grenada. So, Linda, it's some good news with regards to the why. It's not anything that we should be embarrassed or feel bad about, but I would love for us to benefit still from this survey. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I actually took note. My apology. So the subject of the school feeding program, and I did mention, and I really wanted to mention this because I believe there are persons who are of this impression that there's so much money is available and that we are not affected financially. And so I needed to make that point to help us to understand that we are in a crisis, and finances are not readily available as some persons may think. And so it is a fact that Cabinet had to direct the Ministry of Education to use, you used a more fancy word, repurpose, right? I would use the word juggling for everyone to probably understand what you meant by that, meaning that something was budgeted for X within the capital budget and you moved it over for Y because of the situation, the emergency that you have to deal with, right? And so we will have to further repurpose, Linda. We would have to further look within to see where we can take back something and put over there to ensure that the school feeding program never closed down in this school year. And the same too with CDB. I might not be able to give you all the answers that you would have requested. I can provide you with that afterwards. What we did was there were about 2 schools last year that were not in the emergency category or the high priority category. And so because we were going to start phase 2 of that initiative immediately, we've already signed off. We've already identified the scopes of works to be done. And so because we knew that this was just a rollover, what we did was just to further delay because we were not quite ready for those 2 or 3 schools. And so those were minor compared to the Bishop's College, for example, minor in comparison, for example, with the PBC, Montrose, SDA, and so on. And so we felt comfortable with CDB. that we could have rolled these over to phase 2. So those scopes have been activated, and work will continue extremely in the very near future as it relates to those schools that were affected. But it's nothing major, Linda, that would have affected the operation of schools, and that is why we used wisdom there and decided that's where we were going to do that. Who benefited from that? That is where our teachers' devices would have come from. That is where our primary school students' devices would have come from. So it's quite a sizable. And not just that, from that arrangement, we also would have catered for e-testing. So you just heard me say for the very first time, Grenada is going to be able to do all subjects, paper 1, except math and English, online. It's a first. And we're only able to do that because of those decisions that we took during the midst of the crisis. And we are benefiting from that now.
Thank you.
Minister, are you in a position to share how much money was repurposed?
No, I'm very sorry. I can't share it right now, but I promise you I can share that with you before the end of the day. It should not be very difficult to find that figure.
That's it for now, Linda?
Yes, that's for now. I do have others, but I think there are other reporters who want to ask questions.
All right, great. Nancy, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Minister. I wonder if you could elaborate a bit more on the skills training and what areas that are going to be addressed here, and if the ministry is working at all closely with the private sector to get some idea of the areas where we do not have people with the proper skills, particularly in the construction sector and other areas. Thank you.
Okay, extremely important question. Now, the areas, and you're very correct in that I'm assuming what you're thinking, we currently have a mismatch in terms of what we are turning out compared to what we need, right? So we believe that, and government's view is that there must be a better match. It must be demand-driven, the areas in which we are focusing and spending when it comes to skills training, TVET, and so on. Now, those areas are not going to be areas that we pull out of a cap. As a matter of fact, the GT TVET Council, as you know, and I'm happy that you mentioned the private sector, if you look at the composition by law, it involves representatives from the private sector. As a matter of fact, the Chamber of Commerce is there, number of organizations represented. And so we are going to be working very closely with them. There is a listing that is available, but that is being updated, of course, so I can tell you off my head, I know the marine sector, very crucial, very important, right? In one country in our region, there is actually a school for marine studies, right? And so it means that we have to look at how do we create a better match, and that is our focus. We are not just going to be getting into skills training. The second thing is that we have to address this perception that the students who are very intelligent, they move on to do the CAPE, and they move on to do the academic more so subjects, the math and the English and the science and so on, because even CAPE, you do have some skills there in terms of the TAMCC rather. But the very important critical thing is that we have to change that perception, right? The students who are doing the skills subjects, who are focusing on skills, it is not that these students are not as good. Their strengths may be in different areas. Their interests may be in different areas. And we have to reculture. We have to change our perception in that regard. As a matter of fact, very soon, Grenada will be announcing the academic qualification framework that speaks to what are those CVQs equivalent to when we speak about on the academic side. So what level CVQ is equal to a first degree? What level CVQ is equal to an associate degree? And so we are hoping that that too will help to change the perception and the view that many persons have when they speak about skills training. And if you look at where the world is going, if you understand where the world is going, if you understand the call for reskill and upskill, and if you understand what is really happening in the industrial revolution that is taking place, we would understand why it is important to place significant attention in this area. And so, I've said it before, the Grenada Christian Academy in St. Andrew, new school, and it does look like an academy when you look at the drawing. It looks like a college when you look at the drawing. I wish to say this, that we are going to be placing significant emphasis on skills training, on ensuring that our children have access to more opportunities in that area. Other schools, we're expanding laboratories, we're expanding different wings. So Bishop's College, PBC is another example, and we are looking at how do we integrate those subjects into what we are doing currently. And I expect the media to help us tremendously with that effort. It's extremely important in the local and the global context.
Nan,
Yes.
go ahead.
May I follow up? In terms of changing the attitude and the perception about the academic versus the skills, put it that way, what is the ministry doing to bring that to the focus at the primary level, to recognize these skills in young students so their education from an early age can prepare them right up to when they graduate from secondary schools, as opposed to having the skills training classes available at the secondary schools level? Thank you.
And I am going to say this, Nancy, that the policy on skills training, which is in the final draft stage right now, we probably would do a public launch of this to ensure that the public understands the need for that shift, that paradigm shift as it relates to skills training, as it relates to TVET, as it relates to how do we view that, right? And you're right, the culture should not just focus on the secondary school and upwards. We have to get that mindset as low down as the primary school. At some point in our educational history, there was the engagement of primary school students in a broader way. And I'm saying broader because it still exists, not in the magnitude that it did before. That too is on the table, under review. That too is under the microscope. And so we have solicited and we are working with the technical persons to ensure that we have that policy completed very soon. That policy would not just speak to schools, and it would speak to communities. What happens with our schools after 2:30? Right? The investment we make in, you put in on a wing for $10 million and you close at 2:30, and you have people sitting on the block who needs to be skilled, right? You need to educate them. What message are we sending in that regard? But also, how is the community benefiting from those significant investment we're making in the school? Right? And so we have to discuss this at a national level, ensuring that everyone is involved in this process going forward. It is also going to speak to government's investment in skills training. So you spend $50,000 training 20 young persons. At the end of the day, they can't do anything with the certificate that they get. What is the standard? So the standard is going to speak to any investment in skills training, that persons must be able to use the skill and the qualification, certification, to be able to access opportunities, real opportunity. So the young man who comes to me and say, I just got sent back from Trinidad, I'm a good painter, I've been painting here all my life, but Trinidad say I need a certificate. We understand why, because Trinidad understands something very important. And so the NTA, I want to give credit to the NTA, has been doing a superb job in that regard, but we need to expand that scope, and government needs to give even more support to that national conversation.
That's it for the time being, Nancy. MTV, good morning.
Good morning.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Minister. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Okay, I have 2 questions for you this morning. The first, are you in a position to give an update or a comment with regards to the teacher that was arrested in Carriacou in connection with child pornography? And also, secondly, has any student made any request to opt for deferral of the sitting of the CXC exams to 2022 rather, which was provided for by the council?
Okay, thank you for those 2 questions. The first one, I do not want to comment on this since this is a matter that the police and the legal people are dealing with. I would just say that I'm aware of the circumstances. It has been brought to my attention several concerns as it relates to this situation. I do not want to say much more on this subject except that the ministry has done all that it's supposed to do in law as it relates to a report of this nature. The second one has to do with deferrals. So the Caribbean Examination Council, after consulting with all of the necessary stakeholders, did take a decision that any student in the Caribbean region that sits CXC examinations do have an option to defer for the following year, should they feel that they're not prepared, right? After consultation locally with our principals here, the feeling was that the students in Grenada will be reasonably ready for the exam, and there was no need to have any mass deferrals of examination. Now, when this was raised regionally, and remember, when CXC makes a decision or takes a decision, it is not speaking uniquely to Grenada. So you have to consider that there are countries that may opt for this option based on how long they were away from school. Now, we have said to students here, we cannot tell you, or parents, we cannot tell you, you cannot defer because the option is available. However, what we have said is that our policy decision on deferral is that we cannot guarantee every child who chooses or every parent who decides for their child that they're not going to sit the exam this year, that they would automatically be able to return to Form 5 next year. We do not have the space for this. As a matter of fact, Dr. Charles may not even encourage this out of concern because we don't know what is ahead of us in terms of COVID-19. So what we said is that we are going to offer all the possible advice and support that we can. If there's an individual student that the teacher, the principal, and that is what we advocate, the teacher, the principal, and the parent, tripartite discussion agrees that this child is not ready, and we have not had anything significant in that light.
Troy, do you have any other questions?
No, not at the moment.
All right. Yeah, I'll come to GBN in a second. Dr. Charles, I have a question from social media. The 3 active cases right now, the last time it was mentioned that one of the cases that we had was the UK strain. So somebody's asking, what is the situation with the other 2? Is it the UK strain as well? And the person that had the UK strain, is that one of the persons still active at this time?
No, the case that was identified with the UK strain has long recovered. These 3 are 3 recent travelers who are identified.
Thank you. GBN, you have another question?
Yes, I do. It's for the Minister of Education again. Based on the present situation, Minister, that St. Vincent is being faced with, should families decide to relocate to Grenada and would like their students or their children to be inducted in the system here, what arrangements, if any, are being made from the ministry's end to facilitate such?
Okay. So as it relates to persons coming from St. Vincent, as you know, government's policy and position on this matter is that as a brother or sister of the people of St. Vincent, we ought to help. It's our Christian duty to help as well. And so government has committed, right? So in the event that a parent comes to Grenada and is carrying a student, of course, the Ministry of Education will have to do the necessary assessment and will have to look at the current situation case by case to make a determination. To say that we do have a lot of space in our public schools that we can accommodate large number of students, the answer to that would be no, we don't. But I am very certain that should a child from St. Vincent turn up to Grenada and need support in terms of continuing their education, we will find a way, and we have looked at some means through which we can do that. But I would say to you off my head, in terms of accommodation in our schools, most of our schools would already be filled to capacity. We do have some, and those, that's why I said case by case, because they are in certain parts of the island. And so case by case, we would review, make decisions, we would decide how we deal with each case as it comes up.
Any other, Christina?
That's it for now, thanks.
Okay, Minister, you did mention about the school security with the RGPF. Can you go into a little bit more detail as to what that would entail?
Well, the first detail would be that it's very unfortunate we have to even be having this conversation, that people in our communities would find it okay to just vandalize a school, knowing the cost of repairs, knowing that children are affected, knowing that our communities are affected. But it's not just our buildings. We have many students and teachers involved in various programs. So, for example, the 4-H program. And you would find children very excited about cultivating some crop or growing some crop. At the end, they use it in their school feeding program. They even get sometimes to take at home. And you would not believe that persons in the community would choose to go into the school, either destroy or take away all that the students and teachers would have worked so hard to produce. So it's about a physical building, it's about the property as it relates to crops particularly, but it's also about breaking in to take other things. One school in my constituency only a couple weeks ago lost their main computer break-in, and it's extremely sad that we have to be having this conversation. And so I do not want to go into the security recommendations and those strategies that are going to be used to address this, but I would just want to repeat that it is very unfortunate that we have to be having this conversation. Many of these people are parents, and I say no more. It's really sad that as a country we have not gotten to the point where we understand that this is just totally unacceptable.
Linda, do you have questions?
Yes. Morning again. My question this time to Dr. Charles. We're dealing with COVID. COVID has been around since last year. And now for Grenada and Barbados in particular, we have a situation where volcanic ash is affecting the islands. In Grenada case is not as bad as how it is in Barbados. Can Dr. Charles tell us whether or not over the past few days there has been an increase in persons seeking medical with regard to respiratory problems? And what is his advice to persons who are, I would say, you want to use the word, continuous sufferers of respiratory problem? What advice do you have there for people like us who suffer from asthma and other lung problem with regard to ash?
All right, thank you for that question. So the volcanic activity, at least the intensification of the volcanic activity has been quite recent. And yes, as a result of the increase in the quantity of dust, the concentration of dust in the air, and the contribution that is made by the volcanic ash, these two factors can aggravate particularly respiratory conditions such as asthma and bronchitis and so on. Now, with regards to the number of persons seeking care and whether we have noticed an increase, I do not have a report of a significant increase in the number of these encounters. However, that may not mean that we are not seeing a few of them. It's just that I do not have a report that there is any significant rise in the number of persons seeking care for respiratory-related symptoms. However, as I said before, the increase in the amount of dirt and ash in the air can aggravate conditions such as asthma and bronchitis and such. So the advice that we would give to persons are, one is avoidance. If you do not need to spend extended periods outdoors, we encourage you to stay indoors and to avoid exposure as much as possible. When you are outdoors, wear a mask. All right, wear a mask that offers suitable protection against dust. If you have access to an N95 mask, that offers a superior level of protection. And if you do suffer any of these conditions, ensure that you have your medication on hand. If you do not have a prescription right now, or if your medications have run out, this might be a good time to contact your healthcare provider and obtain a prescription and have the medication on hand, so that in the event that you fall sick, that you can make use of them. And of course, for anyone who is feeling unwell, we encourage you to reach out to your healthcare provider, visit your clinic, and seek whichever form of assistance that you may need. Thank you.
Any other, Linda?
The other question I had has already been answered, so that's it for now.
I agree. So, Dr. Charles, I have another question from social media. How would someone be treated? They want to come to this country. They've already received their first vaccination. Would they be treated differently to somebody who has been fully vaccinated so far?
So the guidelines for persons who have been fully vaccinated, all right, these are presently being updated, and they're going to be released to the public shortly. Now, it will apply to persons who are fully vaccinated, not partially vaccinated. So whatever changes would apply to either persons who are fully vaccinated, and that is, when we say fully vaccinated, we mean at least 2 weeks after you have received your second dose of one of the WHO-approved vaccines, or at least 2 weeks after after the approved single-dose vaccine. All right. So we have there are several examples of the 2-dose vaccines, such as the AstraZeneca, the Moderna, the Pfizer, and so on. And single-dose vaccine, I believe the only one that we have on the market right now is the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. All right. So a fully vaccinated person is a person who have at least 2 weeks would have passed after they have received their second dose. And of course, so it would be between them and persons who are either unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. So soon the updated guidelines would be released with regards to these two groups.
Nancy, thank you, Dr. Charles. Nancy, you have another question?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, for Dr. Charles. I asked a couple weeks back on the people that have been vaccinated. Has the Ministry of Health had a chance to look at the makeup of those persons in terms of age and other factors? Thank you.
So this is one of the areas that we are working on right now. We should have had this information already, except that the majority of the data has already been entered, all right, and it is being looked at right now. we should be able to provide that. I should just say that we should be able to provide that breakdown within a short period of time. It's delayed, all right, but we should have it ready maybe within the next week or two.
That's it, Nancy? We're coming up to the 1 hour mark, colleagues. Nancy, you have any other, or that's it? All right, MTV. MTV, good morning. Go ahead with your next question.
Yes, my question is for the minister. This is my final question. Can you tell us where we are at in terms of the rollout of the exams electronically, in terms of students' readiness, preparation with regards to the interface and user friendliness and so forth?
So the assessment that has been conducted by the Ministry of Education tells us that we will be ready ahead of the exams, meaning the availability of devices, the students' readiness for use of such. Interestingly, this year we were going to, for the first time, be able to have our primary school students do their exam electronically for the very first time. And we took a policy decision not to proceed, even if we have all the resources available to be able to do that. The decision was taken not to, because we felt that our primary school students needed a lot more practice to use the devices, the keyboard, and so on and so forth. And so we will be ready for next year exam because we are going to be expanding our IT program at the primary school level beginning this term.
Colleagues, anybody else with a final question before we wrap things up this morning? You have 10 seconds to say. All right, it seems as though we have exhausted all our questions. So, Dr. Charles, I'll give you an opportunity to make some final words, and then we'll go to the Minister for the final say. Thank you.
All right, in closing, I would just like to say that I think as adults, we should all contribute to creating a safe environment for our children. And if as adults we take unnecessary risk or we engage in behavior that puts everyone at risk, then it trickles down to our children, and it affects them sometimes in ways that we do not anticipate. I encourage everyone to continue to be vigilant. The COVID pandemic is still raging right across the world. Even though here in Grenada at present we are enjoying a period of comfort. All right, we have to protect this the gains that we have made over the past year, and we have to always also remember that we are not out of the woods. We will continue to be at risk as long as this disease continues to spread. So we need to continue to follow all of the preventive measures that we have been preaching for the past year. And in addition, I encourage persons to get vaccinated because if we have sufficient persons who are vaccinated and are protected in the community, then this disease will not gain a foothold. So that is my encouragement for everyone today.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. Minister Pierre?
So, Leslie, and I would just close by saying this, something that many people have said before throughout the world, throughout history, when confronted by severe crisis, that a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. And I say this to remind us that every crisis is also an opportunity. And we have a choice what we do with this crisis. We can sit by and, put our hands in the air and give up, or we can choose to be negative through this crisis. And at the end of the crisis, look back and say, if we had known, we should have done A, B, or C. And that is why the ministry is taking a very strategic approach forward in this regard, calling on all of our stakeholders, all of our partners, to work closely together with us to get through this situation. It is a tough time for everyone involved. We're totally aware of this. But I believe the more we work together, the more we find common grounds on which we can operate, it is the better we're going to be coming out of this situation. It is the better for our education system. It's going to be better for our children. And that is my appeal this morning. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Let us not waste this opportunity. We have an opportunity right now to build this education system, to strengthen the structure of this education system, to protect our children, and to ensure that when we look back, and I trust God that we will be able one day to sit and look back and to count how is it that we've been able to get through this, but to get through this situation in a way that we are proud, in a way that we can count our achievements, in a way that we can satisfied that no child was left behind. And so my only other comment is to say that government remains absolutely committed in this process. And I want to join, almost said Pastor Charles, Dr. Charles, in encouraging every Grenadian to go out there. If you have not yet done so, I'm going to be taking my second shot on the 20th of April. And so I want to encourage everyone, if you did not take your first shot as yet, go there and do so. In doing so, you're protecting the future of Grenada. We want to get back to as normal as possible, but it hinges a lot on the actions and the decisions we take now. I feel absolutely comfortable. And for those who may have their very spiritual explanations as to why not, I've consulted with the bishop of my church, who is also a medical doctor, and I feel extremely comfortable that we are doing the right thing. God bless us all.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, Minister for Education, Human Resource Development, Religious Affairs and Information, the Honourable Emmeline Pear, and thank you, Dr. Sean Charles, the Chief Medical Officer. Colleagues, thank you as well for all of those of you joining us on Zoom and viewers on our Channel 22 or Facebook page and, of course, the YouTube channel. So before we end, let's just give you the schedule for this week as the vaccination locations, the vaccination campaign continues between 9 a.m. and 2 p.m. So today, today's the 13th, they are at Radisson. And tomorrow at the National Stadium on Radisson, on Thursday, Radisson as well, Friday, the National Stadium, Munich and Latande, and on Saturday, La Poterie, Tivoli and Chantymel. So they're spread all over, so you have no excuse. Yes, so we come to the end of the program for today. It has been an absolute pleasure. We hope you have a blessed and productive day. We'll see you again next week, Tuesday. Thank you.